Thanks so much, Michelle. Welcome to the State of Play panel. I'm Ali Mirzeski, the editor-in-chief at the Toy Insider and the Pop Insider. I've been in the industry for 13 years, covering it with those two publications as well as the Toy Book, and we are super excited to be the media partner for Hasbro's Women Innovators of Play. I'm really excited about this panel and to get started. So to start off, we're going to introduce our other panelists, starting with Christine. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thank you, Ali. Hello, everyone. My name is Christine O'Connor. I have the privilege to lead the Global Consumer Insights team at Hasbro as the vice president of this group. We talk to kids, families, fans around the world to learn what's going on in their lives, where play fits in, what toys and games they love. So I'm excited to share more about what we're learning in the state of play today with you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Juli Lennett. I'm the U.S. Toys Industry Advisor at Circana, previously the MPD Group. I have had the great privilege of bringing data and insights to the toy industry for over 20 years. And I'm honored to be here today to offer my unique perspective on the toy industry.
Amazing. So between the three of us, we have about 50 years of experience in the toy industry. So lots of years clocked in there with playing with toys and gathering the data about them. So what would you say are some of the most striking differences about the landscape of the industry right now versus when you started? And Julie, I'll let you kick that one off.
Yeah, interesting question, because I think so much has changed, but so much has really stayed the same. But I'm going to stick with the question. First, we can't really ignore the competitive landscape for share of time. So in the last 20 years, consumers, adults and children have access to smartphones and iPads. The video game space has just skyrocketed. And of course, we now have an explosion of content platforms like Netflix and Disney. But I personally think that these things actually have helped the toy industry by allowing people to really connect emotionally with their favorite character or their favorite license, and then purchasing those physical toys to help them enjoy it even more. And kind of proof point there is the second point is that the toy industry has more than doubled since 20 years ago when I first started in the industry. But the mix of toys has changed pretty dramatically. So for example, building sets has grown 8 times since 2004, which is really phenomenal. But the change in that mix is not because kids have changed. The big driver of growth in that 20 years is that older kids and adults have really rediscovered toys during the pandemic. So here's some data points. Ages 13 plus, which makes up about $10 billion in toy sales, has really gained the most share of any cohort over the last 20 years. And of course, tied to those changes is how consumers learn about new toys. 20 years ago, it was all about TV. But today, social media from YouTube to TikTok has become so important to the toy industry. And specifically for the adult market, I think that social media has really created these communities of toy enthusiasts, which have really made collecting and playing with toys kind of socially cool.
Yeah, and to that, I would add that as much as things change, they also stay the same. Play still satisfies the same human needs that have existed for centuries. The need to move around, the need to create, imagine, to learn new things. So what kids and families and adults play with has certainly changed, and what they have access to technologically has changed dramatically and shapes their preferences and what they seek in their leisure time. But we're still satisfying a core set of fundamental needs that are timeless. We hear a lot about the phrase kids growing older, younger, and that has certainly been true for some time. But it kind of reaches a floor because developmental milestones don't shift as quickly or radically, right? Kids learn to talk or walk at the same time that they did a century ago. So yeah, I see a lot of the core needs that humans have continuing to be relevant, just with new, fresh ways to play that satisfy them.
And when we talk about those core foundations and how they're always the same, that means that sometimes at Adventure Media, we talk a lot about how the toy industry is like the fashion industry, and things come around in cycles and trends and fads and things like that. Are you seeing any specific products or even data points that kind of prove that what goes around kind of comes back around again?
Yeah, I would answer that by painting the picture of the world that we live in right now and what a unique time it is to not only be human, but how that shapes what we want out of play. We're living through some pretty uncertain times. There's a real desire for connection and fun that's pretty pronounced and profound, especially following what we went through with the pandemic. This is affecting children, it's affecting parents, and certainly adults, and amplifying a desire to play. So I would say that people seek the familiar and the comfortable in times that are challenging. And that's why we've seen for a long time, and this really does come in cycles, and we're in a wave of it right now, where nostalgic experiences and brands are craved and preferred. And examples of that would include entertainment brands that have been staples for decades. Toys that relaunch like Furby, where there's something innate about that connects with people, and then delivering it in a fresh way to a new audience that meets kids' needs of today is really powerful.
And I think that's such an interesting point. What would you say are some really successful examples of that in the industry right now that you're seeing?
So I'm not going to answer that question directly, but what I can tell you is what the consumer is saying with their wallets by turning to our data. So I did go and look at what are the top 5 growth properties year-to-date August so far. Again, this is based on Circana data. And number 1, which I know the two of you on the panel will know what it is, it's Lego Icons. And this is where their very popular Botanicals line resides, which is super popular with adult women. At number 2, we have NBA trading cards, which is super strong with older boys and adults. The third one is Miniverse, which I love this one because it's a newer, innovative, collectible craft kit. So right now, it's really hard to nail down exactly precisely what category it would belong into, which is great. If you haven't seen it, check out the Harry Potter version. It's super cool. At number 4, we have Bluey. Bluey is arguably one of the top preschool shows on television right now. And then we have Hello Kitty, which is driven by plush. And ironically, there is a Squishmallow Hello Kitty. So if you think about it, those 5 properties really cover off on toys that could work for kids 0 to adults 100 years old. So it really has tremendous, the growth properties have tremendous diversity in the toy industry today, which I think is exceptional. So I'm going to share a stat with you first, because that's what I do. I share data. In 2007, there were 4.3 million babies born in the United States, and that was record-setting for the history of the United States. And then in 2023, 3.6 million babies were born, which if you do the math is about 750,000 fewer babies born. So that's an average decline of 1.2% year over year for 16 years. So kids 0 to 12 make up 3/4 of all toy sales. It's tens of billions of dollars, but growth is not likely to come from that cohort unless it's driven by an increase in average selling price. Where I do think there is an opportunity for growth is in the adult market. And let me tell you why. In a recent study that we did, 43% of adults ages 18 plus said that they bought a toy for themselves in the last year. And that means there are another 147 million adults that have not bought a toy. There is tremendous white space there with adults. And I think we've just reached the tip of the iceberg in reaching these adult consumers. But there's a huge caveat here. I think that the toy industry needs to start creating toys specifically for that adult market and really can't expect those adults to continue buying toys that might initially have been created for a child. A couple other data points from that same survey. We know that these adult consumers are collecting both toys and trading cards. They're playing with lots of Lego. And sometimes, to Christine's point, they're looking to de-stress or get away from their screens. But the number one reason that these 43% of adults bought a toy in the last year was they bought a game to play with others. So for adults, it's about connecting with other people, again, in this post-pandemic world. So I think that's really, adults is really where the opportunity is going to lie in the coming years.
And just jumping off of that too, along with manufacturing them specifically for that adult audience, I think that on the marketing side as well, I'm seeing that too, where we're skipping the kid part of the marketing, right? This is a toy that's designed for adults, and this is where we're going to be marketing to, whether it's through social media, where those adults are, or other collector outlets and things like that. But I just think that's really interesting that we're seeing that shift from it being to market to kids to ask their parents to buy for them to market directly to the adult to buy for themselves.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that we're discovering in our explorations of adults in play is that this may be arising from deficits in play that occurred during childhoods. The adults coming of age who are playing more, buying more play experiences are ones who grew up during the recession of 2008 through 2010, 11. And so treating themselves to experiences that they missed out on is part of the trend, as well as a desire for release and fun and connection.
Great. So we talked a little bit about the past and we talked a little bit about the present and what opportunities are there. So let's jump to the future a little bit. And do you have any advice, words of wisdom, anything that you're looking to hope to see from the toy industry and those entering the toy industry over the next 5 years? Julie, I'll hand this one off to you.
Yeah, and I know this is going to sound very cliche, but my advice is to think outside of the box. Too many companies really look to create the next Barbie or the next Nerf or the next Lego set, just with a different label. And sometimes these can be successful if they have a very unique twist to them that make them super different. But more often than not, they're not as successful. And the reason is because these nostalgic brands, classic brands, have equity. And I think it's really hard to compete with them. So I would just encourage you, be creative. How can you be different? How can you stand out? And by different, that doesn't mean you have to make it super complicated. I'm going to give you an example of Squishmallows, which you probably all heard about, but it was one of the top growth drivers for the total toy industry over the last 2 or 3 years. And Squishmallows is just a plush toy. What's unique is it is the softest plush toy you've ever felt. It comes in all shapes and sizes. It's and different kinds of shapes. And they have super trendy themes, and they change these themes up very frequently. And not only that, but they got a lot of traction through social media kind of at the outset. So ended up reaching a much larger audience, including kids and adults. So my point is you can keep it simple and still win at retail. So my one piece of advice is just be special.
That's great advice. And picking up on some of the themes that you mentioned around Squishmallows, to your point, it is not novel, but it's also meeting people at a moment in time where having something to hug and squish and experience on a sensory level is really desirable. We've seen sensory play explode in the last few years, and most agree that it's because of the need for relief from mental health challenges and screens in particular, wanting to experience tactile forms of play. To answer your question, Allie, my biggest piece of advice, and this is advice that we embed in how we create toys and games at Hasbro and our work with the design teams internally, is to think really deeply about the humans that you are creating for. What is it that they need right now in their lives? Why do they need this? Echoing what Julie mentioned, how is this new and different? If you can answer all of those questions really thoughtfully, it will support your idea in a winning way.
And I definitely agree with that as a professional toy tester, that when you can feel the why in a toy that you're playing with, it always does make it stand out and feel more special. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today, Julie and Christine. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Hasbro for having us on this wonderful panel.